Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you my stabby wrap-up. So this is dark fiction, including horror thrillers, and maybe some true crime, probably not today. And this video is going to be titled something like Panic Reading Horror, because confession time. I keep going on and on in my videos how I'm filming all this end of the year content, how you're going to get my best backlist and frontlist books for all the different genres. But there is one particular video that I have not filmed because I don't have my top 10 finalized yet. And that is the dark fiction that I read that was published in 2022. If you've been following my channel closely this year, you know that I've struggled a lot when it comes to new release horror. It just hasn't been to my taste. I've been disappointed by a lot of it. And yeah, right now I have like a top 7, which is not quite as nice. I know that I could just put it out as a top 7, but I'd really like to get it to a top 10. But in order to do that, it means I need to read a whole bunch of new releases before the year end and hopefully find some last minute favorites. So that's what I've been doing. Here are the results. I have a lot of new buzzy books that have been published this year in this video. Hopefully you find something that you enjoy as well. Let's get started. First, let's talk about Lapvona, which is a horror book that is set in a medieval style era. And within the story, we follow this village through the different seasons of the year. And so we follow them over the course of 12 months. And within this village, they are fanatical with their religious beliefs. And of course, because of that, the story spirals into some really messed up, disgusting places. This book is so hard to summarize. It's just really nasty and it's hard to really describe the plot. I am someone who, as I've said this year, is going out of my way, especially going into the new year, to read messed up and disturbing books. But I will say that reading this one made me partially consider that plan and think that maybe it was a horrible idea. This book certainly made me feel things and certainly made me feel disturbed, messed up, all of that. But I don't know if I liked it. I gotta be honest that this book started out strong-ish, and as it went along, I just kind of wanted it to be over. I kind of wanted to get off the train that I was on, and I felt like it was kind of a book that was meant to be disgusting and shocking for the sake of shocking the reader. And what I really missed is the fact that I didn't feel like it had an underlying theme or message besides kind of a commentary on perhaps religious fanaticism. But outside of that, I felt like the book was a little bit surface level. Maybe I missed something, so if you've read it and could explain more of what you saw underneath the story. But for me, I liked the idea of it, but by the end, I'm not sure if I wanted to actually finish the book. I did, and I kind of wish that I could undo that. It was a lot. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. I didn't really like it. And next up is Woman Eating by Kohda. This is a new release that is a piece of literary horror. It is actually a piece of vampire fiction, which is not normally my thing, but ended up working quite well in this case. In the story, we follow a woman who, of course, turns out to be a vampire, and we follow her through her life. In terms of plot, this one is very slow paced, it's very character focused, and I'll be honest, not a lot really happens. Instead, it feels a bit more like a slice of life story where we follow her through her day-to-day life as she tries to navigate being a vampire in the modern age. Within the story, you learn that she is always hungry. She's very mentally hungry because of the fact that she wants to consume and eat human food, but it is not for her, and instead she has to go and seek out forms of blood, which of course is very challenging. So we follow her. She goes to the butcher and tries to get blood from there and navigate all of that. I'll be honest, normally I am drawn to books that are more plot driven, or at least have more of a plot within the story, because I did find this book to be very dry and slow. But for me, I was hooked in because of the personal connection that I found to the story, and that's that underneath this gaze of a vampire story, you realize that this really is a story about a woman with an eating disorder. While of course her eating disorder is spiraling from the fact that she can't eat normal food, you really get to see the signs of what you would see in anorexia and other restrictive eating disorders today. And it's definitely a topic that speaks near and dear to my own heart at this point. So I really connected to her just thinking about food, longing for food, but not being able to eat it. And along the way, you get to see how that mental hunger manifests. So one thing that is very common with people with eating disorders is that they will obsessively watch other people eat food. So that's a big reason why videos like What I Eat in a Day have become so popular on YouTube, is the fact that a lot of people have eating disorders or disordered eating habits, and they're just hungry. And so if you yourself are not going to eat, you end up watching other people eat. So I found that the portrayal of all of that to be incredibly realistic. I wonder perhaps how much of it was an own voices story, if the author drew from her own experiences or someone in her life, but it definitely rang true for me. I thought it was very well done, very nuanced. Now, in terms of a vampire story, I'll be honest, this one wasn't the typical one you'll see, which is probably why I liked it so much. It wasn't very scary. It didn't really lean into the tropes, but I liked like the fact that it felt fresh and different, and don't get me wrong, it's definitely much more literary. So again, if you're looking for something that's like an action-packed vampire slaughter fest, this is not the book to pick up. But if you're looking for something very nuanced, very thoughtful, that uses the vampire fiction genre to talk about a different issue, I thought that this one was very smart and very well done for what it was trying to do. Next up is No Gods for Drowning by Hailey Piper, and this is a piece of fantasy, thriller, horror mashup that really blends together a whole bunch of genres. I actually thought that this book would be more on the horror side. I will definitely say it's more of a fantasy thriller, and so I almost could have included it in my fantasy wrap-up, but because it's Hailey Piper, I thought a lot of you who enjoy her other horror work will be interested to know about this one as well. And so within the story, we follow a few different perspectives, one being a woman who works as a detective, and she's trying to solve the mystery of a bunch of deaths that appear to be interconnected, and so it appears to be a serial killer that is on the loose. And then we also get the perspective of the serial killer themselves, and I like the fact that the serial killer or the villain within the story is actually very nuanced, and you get to find out the motivations behind their killings, which perhaps makes them a little bit more sympathetic or understandable than you would expect to see in a story like this. I really, again, like the fact that the story blended together so many different genre aspects. I thought that it really helped the book to avoid going into too many tropes. And I'll be honest that in the past, I've been a little bit nervous to pick up a lot of Hailey Piper's work because of the fact that she tends to write some really weird cosmic horror that isn't really to my taste. There's also certain books that involve teeth on certain body parts, and that just makes me really weirded out. And so if you're also someone who's a little bit turned off by some of the really weird stuff she does in her other work, I'll say that this one feels a lot more mainstream, a lot more palatable, but at the same time it felt like it's very much its own story. I love the queer representation in it. They show a very complicated relationship, which I liked, and yeah, it just kind of had the aspects and elements I was looking for. It was such a fun ride. It starts out slower and full of suspense, and then it kind of leads into a more epic action story towards the end with some great climax. And yeah, overall I really liked it. Huge surprise, highly recommend. I think it's going to appeal to people who like both fantasy and dark fiction, and I would really love for more people to try it out because I think it's a sleeper hit that definitely deserves way more attention. Next is The Stars That Wonder by Colin Meloy, and this is a book that is actually written by the lead singer of The Decemberists, who isn't really a band I'm very familiar with. I've listened to a couple of their really more well-known hits, but I'm not a superstar fan of the band, so I've definitely picked up this book first and foremost as a reader, not a music fan. And so this is actually a piece of middle grade horror, but I'm going to argue that it actually is going to appeal more to adults. So within the story, it follows a classic coming of age narrative where you have a group of boys in a small town, and it appears to be some kind of presence or entity that is taking over the town. The adults are excavating this particular site, and it seems that they are unburying something that was meant to be left alone in the ground, and with that, some kind of presence is taking over the adults, and of course the story goes from there. Now, this is a book that I don't understand why it is marketed as middle grade. In all the circles I'm seeing, it's called middle grade, but in my opinion, not only does it have all ages appeal, but I actually would argue that I wouldn't give this book to a middle grade audience, not because it's inappropriate. There's nothing in this book that is inappropriate for a younger audience, but the book is not written for them. And so what I mean is that the tone, the style of the book is written much more in a coming of age narrative. So yes, we have younger protagonists, but it's definitely written in a way that it's intended to be read by older people who actually are going to understand the references to a lot of older horror movies and other movies that were put out in the 80s and 90s, and so someone who is just 10 years old today is not going to get a lot of the references in this book. And again, I think they're really going to miss some of the larger themes that are going on. So I feel like this is a book that was marketed by someone who didn't really understand the coming of age genre and just stuck this in middle grade. So I feel like this book is going to be really underhyped because of the fact that a lot of adult readers like myself often skip over middle grade horror, but I happened to pick this one up because it had such good reviews. And again, I really don't know much about The Decemberists, so my own opinions and thoughts on this one really don't have anything to do with the artist, but instead his work. And I gotta say, as a lead singer of a band, I'm actually really impressed by the quality of his writing. Maybe it's a bad assumption, but someone who specializes in one area of music, I wouldn't necessarily also think that they're going to be an amazing writer, but I thought the prose, the story, the narrative, everything worked really well. It was honestly one of the best quality coming of age narratives that I've read in a while. And yeah, I just thought it was really solid. Again, super underhyped, and I think it's because because of that silly marketing label. So again, you could give it to a young adult, but I honestly think that it's the coming of age story that is going to most appeal to us that are already adults and want to look back with nostalgic on our own youth. So highly recommend. It's tropey, it's predictable, but it's oh so good. Next up is Curse of the Reaper by Brian McAuley, and this is a story of a actor who was formerly a villain in a whole bunch of iconic horror movies, and so the story kind of revolves around this slasher, and of course it's one of these stories where fiction starts to mirror reality and the story kind of goes from there. I've read so many slasher stories, and I will say that this one is reasonably well done. I thought the character development was pretty good. I think that if you love horror movies and love books that kind of are an homage to that, you'll enjoy this one. It was very fast paced, but it really wasn't anything I haven't read before, and I think I'm just a little bit personally burned out of the slasher genre. I've just read a lot of those books, and so I liked it, but was it memorable? Will I be thinking about it later on? Will it make my top 10 list for the year? Well, probably not. Next up is The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. This is the only book that is not technically a 2022 release, but it was re-released in 2022. So if you don't know, this is a novella that came out from Tor.com, who sent me this copy for review. And in this re-release, it's the same story that you may be already familiar with, but basically it's rewriting a very famous and well-known story that Lovecraft wrote and giving it a black lens, because if you're not familiar, Lovecraft is known to be a horrible racist, and so I like that Victor LaValle really takes the story back and tries to come to terms with the fact that there is this really iconic person who really helped to create and found a lot of the modern horror that we write today. But unfortunately, he really was a horrible individual, and I think as a black author and then as black readers, you know, you have to find your place within the community, and so I think this book is very important. Now, I like this book quite a bit, but I'll be honest, the time period of this book, the fact that it's set in the United States, I don't have a personal connection to that time period or setting, but I definitely appreciate what this book is going to do. I love Victor LaValle's writing. I think he's beautiful. He has fantastic prose. I do prefer his longer fiction, so The Changeling and The Devil in Silver, just in terms of plot. I think they're more to my taste. I just kind of followed the story better, but this one definitely packs a punch. It's very racially charged, and I do recommend it if you're a Victor LaValle fan and have not checked this one out. You definitely want to, and it is a good place to start if you haven't read his work, because again, it's very short and very easy to consume in a day. Next is Girl Without Tears by T.L. Finlay, and this is a thriller book that follows a woman who has a condition known as SIPO, where she doesn't experience pain the way that other people do. Within the story, she's called back to her hometown because a young girl has gone missing, and she has a past history with their parents, and so she goes back. Of course, as you would expect, it brings back a lot of feelings and kind of, you know, rehashes things that have been in the past before. My complaint about this book is that it's much more about the adult relationships, and the missing child kind of gets forgotten at different points in the story, and you almost have the characters like going on like semi-friend dates instead of looking for this kid, or they're looking for the kid but it's kind of like romantic at the same time. It's weird. I know the author was doing it for certain reasons, but I can't say that I liked it. I definitely prefer my thriller books without that heavy relationship focus, but despite my criticisms, I'll be honest, I got really hooked into the second half of this book. There's some twists and turns that some of them I saw coming, some of them I didn't, and regardless, I just enjoyed going along for the ride. So if you're someone who's maybe in a slumpy mood and just wants to pick up a book that is oh so readable, this one is a big page turner. I don't think it's perfect. I definitely think it's flawed, but was it a fast, exciting read at the time? Absolutely. Last, I want to talk about Where Black Stars Rise, which is a graphic novel about a Lebanese immigrant who works as a therapist in training, and within the story he is taking care of a patient who has schizophrenia. That patient goes missing, and then the story goes from there as he tries to find them. This is a new release from Tor Nightfire. I believe it's the first graphic novel that they've put out. I used to read a lot more graphic work, but I've definitely shied away from that on my channel because I haven't seen a lot of interest in it. But if you would like me to talk about more of these books, definitely let me know. This is one that I really enjoyed in terms of the brightness of the color palette. So you can see just from the cover it's very bright, and I'll just show you like the first page. Sometimes YouTube's weird about showing panel art, but if you look there, it's just very bright colors. I didn't particularly love the artwork style itself. It just wasn't to my taste. I tend to prefer a more realistic style, but I do think it fit the story well. The story itself I thought was good. I really appreciated the cultural aspects, bringing in the immigration story and all those pieces, and it's very psychological in nature, but I'll be honest, it didn't fully hold my attention. It didn't really grab me in. It's a relatively short read, so you can just fly through it, but it didn't leave an lasting lasting impression on me like so many other graphic novels have. So a little bit disappointed by it, liked what they were doing, definitely want to see more from Tor Nightfire in this regard. But this one wasn't a new favorite, I'll say, so liked it, didn't love it. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to know, of the books I talked about, are there any that you're planning on checking out for yourself? And don't worry, I think I've got some good favorites to add to the list, so hopefully there will be that top 10 video coming out with my favorite dark fiction published in 2022, but you're gonna have to wait till after Christmas for that. So if you're new to my channel, definitely want to stick around. You can hit subscribe so you don't miss a video. And if you're new and have already subscribed, thank you so much. You can also give me a thumbs up. You can share this around online. You can drop a comment, even just a little ghost or a vampire. And if you want to help me out more, you can hit that little notification bell so you never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.